afternoon, everybody. I'm going to give a few more seconds for folks to join. But my name is Rachel LaBruyere. I will be the moderator of the panel today. We're talking about getting through law school today. I know earlier you talked about getting to law school. And I'm going to let my panelists go ahead and introduce themselves. You will do a better job representing yourself than I will. So if y'all could just briefly introduce yourselves, and I'm just going to call on Akya to start us off.
Thank you, Rachel. Good to see everyone here today. I'm Akya Rice. I'm an attorney here in Charlotte. I work in-house at Train Technologies, where I practice employment law. I've been practicing for about 7 years, so not too far removed from law school. And I'm happy to talk to you all today about what that experience was like.
Also, I meant to ask if each of you could say where you went to law school.
I attended law school at Vanderbilt University.
Thanks, Akya. Jennifer, would you like to go next?
Sure. Sure. Good afternoon. My name is Judge Jennifer Fleet. I'm one of the newly elected judges here in Mecklenburg County. I started that in January of this year, 2023. Before that, I was a practicing family law and appellate attorney for just shy of 10 years. So I am one of what would be considered a non-traditional lawyer. I came to law school as a third career and then on to be a judge. And I attended school at the Charlotte School of Law.
Thank you, and my apologies, Judge Fleet. I will be addressing you appropriately for the rest of the panel. High school students, take note. You always refer to the judge as your honor or judge. So do what I say and not what I do. Shante, would you like to go next?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Shante Martin. I currently practice law at Cranfield Sumner here in Charlotte. I've been practicing education law for 20 years. I clerked on the North Carolina Supreme Court as soon as I graduated from law school, then went to the Attorney General's office, represented the university system and the Department of Public Instruction. I represented as general counsel the North Carolina Community College system for several years. And now I'm in private practice doing representing charter schools, some private schools, some universities. So I've done education law my entire career. I also am the inaugural instructor at Wingate University for their higher education law and policy course. So I teach individuals who want to be college presidents and leaders on how to be the best college president they can be as an instructor. So that's a summary of my career and what I do. I'm glad to be here.
Very cool. Well, thank you to each of the panelists. It's great to have such a depth of experience on the panel today. A little bit about myself. Again, my name is Rachel LaBruyere. I'm a practicing attorney at Bradley Arendt Bolt Cummings here in Charlotte. I'm a second career attorney. So like Judge Fleet, did not go to law school until I was well into my 30s. And I graduated from UNC School of Law. So just to get us kicked off, and Akya, I'm going to pick on you again. I'd like to hear from each of you about, I know we talked about getting to law school earlier today. So I'd love to hear from each of you how you chose which law school that you went to. And then we'll talk about what it was like being in law school.
Sure. So I'll just say cost and opportunities for scholarship was probably number one in terms of my decision-making process for where I was going to go to law school. I did not want to necessarily incur a lot of debt to attend law school, so I really looked for opportunities to get scholarships. So I would say cost was number one for me, not necessarily location, not necessarily like what specific programs the law school offered, although I think those things are important. But for me personally, it was cost in terms of where I wanted to go. And so I sort of started ranking the schools where I was admitted to see, first of all, what the cost to attend was, the overall cost, not just tuition, but also to see what scholarship opportunities were presented by each school to sort of see where I could get the most bang for my buck.
Super smart. Judge Fleet or Shante, do you want to say a little bit about how you chose which law school you went to?
My decision making was almost the opposite end of the spectrum from Ms. Rice. I chose the location while I applied to 4 or 5 different schools. I looked at both large and small schools, but I chose the one, and I chose to come to Charlotte because I had family here. And I knew that how rigorous law school was going to be. So I added into my mixture, my decision making, where my support system was. I didn't want to go somewhere where I would be completely on my own. Now, I went to law school, I was close to 40, and I had 2 children in elementary school. So I knew that I was going to need support system as well. So while cost might have been first up, it really kind of took a backseat to how is this going to be the most effective use of my time for 3 years, given my particular family dynamic. So for me, it was definitely support system heavy as opposed to cost heavy, although that played a factor as well.
And for me, it's a combination of statistics and location. I knew I wanted to practice law in North Carolina, and certainly for the state of North Carolina, Carolina law is probably the most people who go to Carolina law are most likely placed in North Carolina. So it's a tremendous large percentage of individuals. So I thought that that would assist in my being able to get a job here in North Carolina is at Carolina. And I certainly had a judge, actually the judge who hired me, he said, if you went to Carolina, I just assume you already know what you're doing. Like he didn't even really pay much attention to anything under that. So the name actually held a lot of weight. I mean, that was 20 years ago. I'm assuming nothing's changed much, but that's the reason that I chose Carolina. I wanted to stay in North Carolina.
I love how different some of your reasons were. And I just hope that the students on the panel right now understand there is no right way to choose a law school. It's all about what your needs are, where you think you want to practice. I moved back to North Carolina after more than a decade out of the state in order to go to Carolina law because I knew I wanted to practice here. So, mostly I'm hoping that you all understand that it's a very personal choice. And, there's no right way to go about it. So let's talk about law school a little bit. I personally loved law school. Not everybody feels that way. So I'd love to hear from each of you. What was your favorite thing about law school? Not all at once now. Nobody had any favorite things about law school?
I'll start. So it was definitely not the curriculum. I'll start there by saying that was probably my least favorite. It is difficult, and it is sort of a learning curve when you get there, because in my experience, it requires a lot more effort than I personally put in undergrad. So I had to get real serious about what I was doing. But what ended up being my favorite thing about law school was the community I found there. Vanderbilt had a really, really excellent BALSA, so Black Law Student Association program. It was well supported by the school. We got to do all sorts of initiatives, and we would share outlines or share study strategies or do social outings and sort of just really have our own little community of support. And I found that to be crucial in the success that I had in law school. So I think just the community I found there ended up being my favorite part of law school. Nashville was fun. So I will mention that the city in which I went to law school also ended up probably in ended up being one of my favorite things as well. But just it falls second to my friendships that I was able to develop there.
I love that. Shante and Judge Fleet, I don't know if you have anything to add, but I'm happy to ask another probing question here. Well, first and foremost, I want to make sure if you're going to use any lingo, let's make sure we define it for the students on the call. I think lawyers, we have a lot, it's like we speak our own language, and sometimes we forget that not everybody is fluent in that language. But one of the things that's so important in law school is time management. I know as high school students, you guys are learning about that right now. You'll learn even more in college, but law school is really, time management is where you've really got to buckle down. So I'd love to hear from either of you, all three of you, about, what sort of time management skills and tactics worked for you in law school.
I'll jump in there. I definitely, for me, I treated law school very much like a job. I had kind of a job schedule. So during the day, classes, even if I was done with class, I would still go to the library and study or practice or work like during the day. On the weekend, I would, carve out hours as well. It worked for me because I made law school kind of my life. I was not a second career student, but for me personally, it was worth it for me to kind of get law school out of the way before I did all the extra stuff. And for me, I was able to literally make law school my life. I didn't have a job first year, second year, off campus anyway, but like every Monday through Friday, 8 to 8 or whatever was law school. And so I prioritized it that way. Everybody in my life just kind of knew I'm not going to be able to do everything right now, this time of my life. I can't go to all the birthday parties necessarily. I did more by third year, but certainly my first 2 years, I just put in my mind and focused that law school is going to be what I do. That's my life, 8 to 8. This is my schedule. And so that's how I made it a priority, because nothing else was a priority.
I would add to that as well. You need to understand how you learn, right? So, and when you figure that out, the earlier you figure that out, the better, and be consistent. So for me, I am an early morning person. I'm up at 5, I'm in the gym. I do the gym, I go to work. And the same thing was that way when I was in law school, very similar to Ms. Martin. I had a schedule. This is how I treated it. I exercise, school, study, kids, work. That's how it went. I have a very dear girlfriend who's a fantastically successful lawyer. She's over in the Raleigh-Durham area. She is complete opposite. Her brain did not click in until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And then school, study, and she was up till 2 in the morning, and she was perfectly fine with that. She still does that. What I would say is figure out how you learn and when you best absorb your information. I hit a brick wall at 3 in the afternoon. I'm no good, but I'm great at 6 in the morning. Some people are the complete opposite. They're garbage first thing in the morning. You can't talk to them, but 8 o'clock at night, their mind is on fire and they're doing great. So again, sort of the topics we're talking about, embrace your non-traditionalness, embrace whatever works for you, figure it out early, and then apply it consistently across the board. If you can figure it out before you get to law school, you'll be more successful and you'll absorb your information better.
I think those are both really excellent points. And for the students, on the observing right now, you're in high school. You don't get to make your own schedule right now. You are told when to be there, when class starts, when class ends. In college, you're going to get a little bit more freedom to make your own schedule, and the same thing in law school. So I think taking note now of what times of day are you able to absorb information, just make sure you're paying attention to that through college. And by the time you get to law school, you'll likely know. I know probably those of you on the phone or on the Zoom right now are like, I have no idea. Like, I just do what I'm told, right? You will get more opportunity to explore that. Also want to make sure I mention, please, if you have any questions, drop them into the chat. We're going to have some time for QA at the end. Would absolutely love to have questions from you all. Our goal is to have this be as useful for you and practical for you as possible. So please drop in questions as you think of them. So I want to ask each of you, when you were in high school, did you know you wanted to be an attorney?
Yes.
Yes. Akya?
Absolutely not.
And Judge Fleet did not. So interesting. So Shante, can you talk a little bit about what that looked like in high school for you? Were you looking at undergrad with the idea of law school in mind? How were you making that a reality at that young age?
Yes, so I knew I wanted to be a lawyer when I was 12, and I wanted to be a lawyer that helped with children's issues. I'm from a kind of traditionally underprivileged, low poverty-stricken environment, and school was kind of my way out. Being successful in school opened doors for me where I was able to experience things I would have never in a million years have experienced. So I like the idea of education being a catalyst. And so I saw that being able to be a lawyer that impacted education or affecting educational policy would be effective. So since I was 12, I was very much like, I want to go to law school and do something related to education. And that's literally what I did. So I picked a law school related to that. I did internships that were related to that. And that's literally what I've been doing 20 years and I love it. So yes.
That's amazing. I personally am still figuring out what kind of law I want to practice. So kudos to you. Akya and Judge Fleet, I don't know if you want to add a little bit about what made you choose law school eventually.
So I was all over the place. I am going to be the complete opposite of Ms. Martin. When I was in high school, I thought I was going to study political science. I was going to be the first female president of the United States. And that's where I was headed. I then hit undergrad and I became enthralled. I was a psychology, special education, and women's studies. That was my major. And I shifted in a whole different direction. And I spent the first half of my career doing other things and then became a lawyer and then decided, oh, I think I want to sit on the bench and be even more impactful. So I think that not knowing that you want to be a lawyer going, and that's okay. There's so many things, like our keynote speaker was saying, there's so many things you can do with a law degree, both traditional and non-traditional. There's so many facets of the law and there's so many burgeoning areas. There's stuff that y'all are studying in high school that we didn't even think about when I was in high school. Now that's a long time ago. I mean, I'm probably out aging most of y'all. So when I was in high school, we didn't have a whole lot of the subject matter. So I think it's okay not to take the direct route. And I think when you don't take the direct route, it adds a lot to your practice as an attorney. It gives you this broad and very well-rounded sense of experiences and information. And I think that makes you a good lawyer. I think either way is good. I don't think there's a particular path to take at all.
Just to follow up on that, I think sometimes it's easy to think you already need to have it figured out, especially when you hear people who practice law being asked, like, when did you know? And they're like, I had a moment when I was a kid and I knew I wanted to be a lawyer from then, or one day I woke up and I just knew I was destined to be an attorney. So if you feel like if you don't have those moments, it's not meant to be. But those moments may not happen for you, and you can still work out your own destiny if you determine that you want to practice law. So I just want to encourage you to don't look for those moments as an indicator that this is the career that you need to have or not have. Just think about what you hope to get out of being an attorney and sort of go from there, and make up your mind as you're able to, and don't feel like it has to happen at any moment. I admire Shante for knowing what she wanted to do long ago. Like, to Rachel's point, it took a while for me to figure out what type of law I wanted to practice, what environment I wanted to practice in. And so just take your time to figure that out.
I think these are great points and great advice. Advice maybe I wish I had prior to going to law school. So we'll talk just a little bit more about law school itself. Can you all speak a bit to what the classes were like? I know for some of you it's been more recent than others, but you get to law school, you're so excited, and then you have to really dig in and start studying, right? It's a lot of reading, it's a lot of taking notes. So if one or any of you could speak to sort of what classes were like, with an eye on, how does that differ from high school classes, from college classes? Just to give the students just a taste of what to expect.
So I'll just briefly say, when I got to my first law school class, I probably in the first 5 minutes was thinking I did not belong there. And I was terrified, and I felt like everyone was so much smarter than me, and I was in over my head, and I didn't understand the words that the professor was saying, and I was like terrified of being called on. And so, to be honest, my first few classes were terrifying. And so I had to call on my friends and my family for support and encouragement, and to remind me that I ended up where I was supposed to be, and I got into the same law school as everyone else, and we're all here to learn and sort of just stay focused on running my own race and doing my best. And so while the classes were scary and intimidating, as someone who, you know, I don't have lawyers in my family, I didn't have sort of that background that some people come into law school with. After I sort of got out of my own head and just determined that I was going to study and do my best, they became more of learning opportunities for me. So I would initially just spend the whole class being so scared I wasn't able to grasp any of the material, which only made me more scared because I'm like, now I don't know even what's going on. So after I got that out of my mind, I could see that this is an opportunity for me to learn. Like, the professor is invested in me learning what a contract is, learning what a tort is, or whatever. And so I just started to approach it as, how can I get the most out of this class? And if I need to ask a question, there's no shame. People may think I don't understand, but that's fine. No one's going to be more invested in my education than I am. So I just had to get out of the fear of people thinking I didn't know what was going on, and just sort of buckle down and take the classes as an opportunity. And I will say, my professors were generally like really supportive and nice, and so that helped, but it was a very different experience, like I said earlier, from college, where, you know, you may not have that much interaction with your professors. You may be in a class full of 400 people and your professor doesn't even know who you are. So it was just a different experience for me.
Again, I think that is great advice. You know, one thing that you may have heard, and maybe you know what it means, maybe you don't, is this concept of the Socratic method. And what that means is that you won't know a lot when you start classes, but eventually you will figure it out. But professors are going to call on you. You're going to be asked really tough questions. You're going to be reading cases where you're like, I have no idea what just happened in this case. But the idea being that you'll look back on it and be like, wow, remember when I didn't even know that term? And it really will build on itself throughout the semester. So let's talk a little bit about internships. So internships are a big part of law school. In the summer, during law school, you don't get to just enjoy your summer like you used to be able to do. During summers, people have internships. Some of them are paid, some of them are not. But I'd love to hear from each of you about what kind of internships you had during the summer in law school, and how you chose those and how they went.
I did. I wasn't sure exactly what context within which I wanted to do education work. So actually during the summer, I worked at the Children's Law Center, and that was a lot of fun to just get to see kind of what people did. So again, that was helpful. And just a different summer, I worked for a firm just to kind of get exposure to that. But I got a lot of experience. And one of the things that I actually train interns now, one of the things I think makes a big difference in what interns you get is to look to get internships that would allow you getting experience and kind of getting your hands on stuff. A lot of internships, which I guess are okay. You just learning, not just learning, but you don't get to get your hands on stuff. Like, you don't actually get to do anything substantive. And that's where you really learn if you like this or not, or that's where you really learn if this is something I actually want to pursue or not. If you're not getting your hands on stuff and it's kind of people just maybe put you at a desk and give you work to do that's busy work, but you don't actually get to see how the sausage is made, get to actually go and see what people do in court, see what a deposition looks like if that's what you want to do, see what it's like at a board meeting if you don't want to do kind of litigation. Being able to look for internships that offer you actual hands-on experience is something I think is very important to hone in on.
So I'll just add a little bit to that. I actually chose over my summers to continue and attend classes, but what I chose to do was something that we called a clinic. So it was the ability to get credits, but you're working, it's a clinic setup. So you may get paired up with a lawyer, you may be doing something. So for example, I did one that was a domestic violence agency here so that I could get class credit while I was learning things. It's a little different than an internship because I wasn't getting paid. By all means, you're not getting paid. You pay for the class credits, but it allowed me to continue going to school through the summer because especially when you think about, cost and things like that, I chose to go to school year round, but I tried to make very effective use of it. So when you're looking at law schools, you may want to consider if they have clinic programs so that you can both get credit and get the work experience at the same time. Other schools do a really good job of pairing you with internships and those kind of things. So there's a couple of other options if, that's what some of the considerations you need to take.
Thanks. That's definitely helpful. One thing I do want to note for the students is that typically where you intern your second year of law school, your second summer of law school can sometimes be where you end up in a full-time position. And so that's in part why internships are really important in law school. But I love Judge Fleet and Shante's answers about getting practical hands-on experience. And that's the time to explore the areas of law you may want to practice as well. So just my 2 cents. So Akya, mentioned really basing her law school choice on scholarship money. Where was the place where she could maybe go into the least amount of debt? Paying for law school is really daunting. So love to hear from each of you about, how did you pay for law school? What did the financial aid process look like? Akya, you noted scholarships. Can you give a little bit of advice on how to even figure out what scholarship schools do offer? And so Akya, I'm going to pick on you again, since this was a part of your answer earlier. I know I just asked 3 different questions, but whichever you want to answer first, I think is fine.
Sure. So I think, so I'll talk about the scholarship process. Usually, typically, or at least in my experience, there's a separate application that you can complete to be evaluated for scholarships, and some are based on merit, some are based on need. I applied for whatever possible scholarship I could get that was specific to my law school, but there are also scholarships that are universal, that meaning if you apply for them, you can use that money no matter where you go to law school. So they're not necessarily tied to your specific law school. But I applied to the ones that were specific to my school. And I also followed up with our admissions office to see if there was anything additional that I maybe missed that I could apply to, and to see if there was room. So, for example, I got a scholarship offer from a different law school. I called my law school and said, "Hey, this school wants to give me X amount of money. Do you guys think there's any opportunity here for you all to increase the offer that I currently have for the scholarship?" So there is a bit of negotiation involved if you choose to do that. And then ultimately, in order to sort of bridge the gap between like paying for my apartment or paying for my books, I ended up taking out education loans from the government, which you all, I'm sure, have heard all about in the news maybe. But taking out loans just to sort of cover the cost of living. But my game plan was to just see how much money I could get from the school and do whatever application I could do. And some of them involved, writing essays, or some were just strictly based on testing scores. But I applied to literally everything that was available. And of course, I begged my parents for money. Didn't always work out, but they were always my backup plan.
I don't know, Shante or Judge Fleet, if you have anything to add on the financial aid front.
Unfortunately, I didn't get many scholarships, so I literally just finished paying for law school a couple years ago. So I'm not the test case for that. And there are a lot more, I think, that scholarships that are available now than they were years and years ago. A lot of money to be handed out. So look for the money. It's there.
I think,
yeah, I would say look for the money early. And it really pays off. And this is going to sound so cheesy and so stereotypical, but The groups and organizations that you participate in high school, Key Club, National Honor Society, all of these small groups, you can link together like links in a chain, small scholarships. So don't always think that your scholarships have to be huge. I'm similar to Ms. Martin. I was a non-traditional, older, later returning student. Some of those scholarships really depend on people coming straight from undergrad into law school. You know, they're very classified. I took only loans. I had straight loans. I think I had one merit scholarship while I was in law school. So it's difficult to pay it off. But the stuff you're doing now in high school really can lead up to law school scholarships. And there's databases now. We didn't have databases. The search for money now is very broad. So if you start looking early and make it a long-term kind of thought process, you can find the money to pay for law school for sure.
I think this is all really great advice as somebody who's in the throes of paying off my student loans right now. Definitely, I will say that for myself, paying for law school was one of the reasons why I put off going to law school for so long. So, great advice from each of our panelists. I think particularly Judge Fleet saying, start looking for the money early. Absolutely second that. So one of the things that the students on the Zoom are probably really familiar with is extracurriculars, right? You do extracurriculars in high school. You do some in college. Well, depending, you get to choose whether you do some in college. But law school is no exception. There are plenty of extracurriculars in law school. There are journals, in which students help publish academic articles, right? Articles about the law. Some students even publish their own articles. There's also something called moot court, in which students get to practice their oral advocacy skills. And all I mean by that is standing up in court and making arguments. I personally did both a journal and moot court at law school. It was super fun, but it was also a lot of work. I would love to hear from the panelists whether or not, you did any extracurriculars in law school, which you did. Just a little bit about that experience.
Hi, I definitely did. I did I was a guardian ad litem, which is a volunteer position where you help basically be an advocate for a child when they are taken out of the home or different variations like that, and the court is looking potentially to remove parental rights. And so I was an advocate for the child, which was a great opportunity to get interaction with the court, be in court, write reports to a judge and do almost kind of like investigations, because you're getting reports from schools and talking to different people. And so I really, really thoroughly enjoyed that. It was a nice segue into kind of the legal world and doing that. I also started a group called Law for Us, Legal Advisory Work for undergraduate students, that was designed to help college students learn more about law school for those who were not traditional or didn't necessarily have family members who were lawyers, to basically teach them the tools and give them the steps of how to get into law school. And so that was a lot of work, but a great volunteer opportunity. I also was a graduate student helping, that was kind of my job. So I got paid, it was on campus, and I could work, but not be all over the place, and it was consistent with my schedule. So I had a variety of things to participate in, was active in the Black Law Students Association as well at Carolina. So it was a lot of stuff to do, but it was all very fun and coincided. Nothing took up so much time where I couldn't focus on my work, and that was over the 3 years. But it actually helped law school, because law school is a lot of work. It's very daunting. Having that outlet to participate in different things really helps to create a lot of balance. So I definitely highly recommend, once you kind of get your bearings, to get involved in extracurriculars, whatever is commensurate with what you like to do.
That's great. Judge Fleet, do you want to add?
The only thing I was going to add, whatever extracurriculars you choose, you'll find that these are friendships that you'll maintain. There are people that I met my first year of law school. I came to a new city for law school, so I didn't go to undergrad here. I didn't have a network here. And the people that I met, we're still friends. Some of them are still here, some of them are not. So, think of it that way as well. And like Ms. Martin said, it's just so daunting that you need the outlet. But remember, take part and you're going to develop some really great friendships and you're going to really find your tribe. And that's going to help too. And that's going to carry you through your career. I mean, these are people that you're going to know, really for the rest of the time that you're practicing and beyond. So it's really kind of nice. I would say definitely take it.
I love that. And to your point, Judge Fleet, Akya was talking about the great community that she had at Vanderbilt Law. The folks that you go to law school with are going to be your colleagues for the rest of your life. And I think that that's something that's so different than high school and college, is that, you're truly going to be colleagues because you're all going to be practicing the same profession. There are a lot of people I went to law school with that are here in Charlotte, some of which I've been on the other side of a case, a lawsuit. We've been litigating against each other. So really keeping that in mind as you're building those friendships and those relationships in law school, I think is key. So we've got a couple more minutes, and again, really want to encourage students on the Zoom to drop questions into the chat. I know we haven't told you everything about getting through law school that you need to know. So please, don't be afraid to ask questions. We'd love to hear from you if you have any follow-ups from what we've talked about, or if there's something we haven't covered yet. So I think one of the last things I'd like to ask, before we go to Q&A, I'd like to ask each of the panelists is, what advice would you give your high school self, both about law school, but also about sort of the journey to get there? What would you tell, 16 or 17-year-old you?
I'll start with this one. Perfection is not required. This idea that you have to be this AP honors, 5-6 point weighted, whatever, perfectionist attitude, that mentality is not necessary to get through law school. I was a solid B student in undergrad, a solid B student in graduate school, and a solid B student in law school. That's a conscious choice that I made in order to enjoy the schooling, enjoy the experience, and not get too wrapped up in this perception of what we think it takes to get through high school, college, and law school. Perfection is not required. You can be successful as a good student without thinking you have to make straight A's. And when you accept that, you relieve yourself of a lot of self-imposed anxiety. And I think that will make you a better student and more successful in the long run. I really do. That would be my advice. Perfection is not required.
I definitely second that, but I also know that for some students, more is expected of you. I know particularly, one of the questions that I was going to end with was also, for Shante and Akya, how often were you one of the only people of color in your class, and sort of how did that impact what it looked like to get through law school?
Well, just back to the first question real quick before I move on to that.
Yeah.
One thing I would tell my high school self, and everyone, take this with a grain of salt. Your family and friends, they love you, but they're not going to live your life. So listen to all their advice, sure, and thank them for being invested in your success. But ultimately, you have to be satisfied with the path that you choose. So don't let everyone else's voices sort of overcrowd your own voice and your own internal sort of compass, because you have to live the life that you choose for yourself. And then at Vanderbilt, I was often one of one in my classes. They did their best in terms of diversity initiatives, but in a class of 174, there were probably 12 to 15 students of color. And so it was, and I'll say I went to a high school that was 99% Black. I went to a college that was a PWI, but I was involved in I was involved in activities that I was able to surround myself with people who looked like me. So when I got to law school, it was sort of a shock. I would say it was sort of a cultural shock. And so I had to sort of get used to that. But that's, again, why I really appreciated BALSA, because I felt like I could, go there, be myself, and not have to be on, or not have to talk away, or not have to look away, and just also be able to talk to share our own experiences, because I wasn't the only one coming from a predominantly Black high school. I wasn't the only one coming from, my state or what my community looked like. And so it also prepared me for the legal profession, where I am still often one of one in a lot of legal settings, depending on what you're doing and where you're going. And so I definitely was an experience, and just don't get discouraged by that. It is definitely something that to be overcome and sort of just dealt with as it comes up.
And some similarities. I mean, I've been one of one my whole entire life. I went to a high school where I'll be the only one in my class, and college at Carolina, overwhelmingly a minority. Law school, very much a minority. When I clerked on the North Carolina Supreme Court, I was literally the only African American or person of color of everybody, all the judges, all the assistants, all the other law clerks, and at the AG's office in my section, the only one. So literally, my firm is very maybe 5 people of color over 3 offices throughout the whole state. So that's just like my life, always. And so always, I've never once looked at myself as someone less than, different than. I mean, I recognize I'm, quote, different than in terms of color and frankly experience, but that doesn't equal less than, and I've never thought about myself in that way. So I actually looked at it as I'm here just like everyone else. And so if I'm here, that means I have the ability to be successful. My identity is in Christ first, and that means I can do anything. So it doesn't matter kind of what the circumstances are around me. It has nothing to do with me. And so that's never been an impediment, never been something that slowed me down, gave me pause, created some type of inferiority. If you're there, that means you're supposed to be there and you can be successful. So that's my take on that.
I feel like that also doubled as something to tell your high school self. Thank you so much, Shante, for that. So we do have one question in the chat. Kavita, I'm sorry that they directly messaged me. So, but we just got a couple minutes left. So let's keep this one brief. But what does the typical day of a lawyer look like? Which I think is such a great question and kind of a hard question to answer. So maybe each of you could give a brief summary of what your typical day looks like. I'll kick it off. It all depends. My days can look so different. This past Monday, I drove to Boone, North Carolina, and argued a motion for summary judgment against an attorney who for sure thought I was some dumb little girl. And, I was in this old courthouse, wheeling in all my files and feeling real weird about it, but I won. So that was great. And then last night, I was up until 10 p.m. talking to a consulting firm about how to message my client's data breach. So it really depends on the day for me. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people. But I'll turn it over to panelists to also share.
Yeah, I definitely second that. It really depends. Similarly, because I do education work, it's very much like a general practice, just in an educational context. So just in this week, I've had a lot of sexual harassment related things. An employee sent a sexually explicit video to another student at one university, a student who threatened to kill other students and sent threatening messages. So there's discipline hearings that come along with that, employment issues, contract issues. That's one of the things that's very interesting about it. At least the type of practice I have, it's a lot of varied topics that can change at any moment. So the typical day just involves a lot of different things going on at a lot of different topics going on with different clients and different meetings at one time, but it's very exhilarating to get to do a lot of different stuff.
Akya and Judge Fleet, any additions? Okay, we've got one more minute. So, okay, go ahead, Akya.
I was just going to say briefly, since I'm in-house counsel, I work for one company within their in-house legal department, and my practice is employment law. So my day-to-day looks like Basically a bunch of calls all day, making sure our employees aren't doing crazy things at work, and advising if there needs to be an investigation, if there needs to be some disciplinary action, if we need to update our policy, if we need to, any sort of workplace issue that comes up. I basically feel like a consultant sometimes, because I'm being pulled in to make sure we're being compliant with all of the employment laws that happen, that we have to abide by. And so it is interesting work. That's why I chose employment law, because it's definitely interesting.
Oh, I'm on mute. Thank you so much, panelists. This was, I think, a really great conversation. This is all the time we have for this session. But again, thank you so much to the panelists. And I hope that the students on the call have gotten what they hope for out of this panel. So thank you all, and see you on the main stage.